Okay, good morning. So what we are doing today is Zion Amanal. We are at Chavav based by the Gemara, but before we go any further, I just wanted to finish up on the topic that we had just started mentioning a little bit yesterday. So say a little bit more about it. This idea that on Yom Kippur, their girls were going out dancing in the vineyards. And we said about the Marshal. The Marshal says you can't look at this Mishnah as a source, if anything, to condone mixed dancing and the like, because of the fact that it says over here that the girls would go out dancing, because it was very clear the girls would go out dancing. It didn't say the girls and the boys would go out dancing. Remember, this is Yom Kippur and it's Tu B'Av. Later on in the Gemara, in the end of Taanit, we're going to explain what was so special about Tu B'Av. But for our imagination, the idea of Yom Kippur being a day of tefillah, the whole thing doesn't make any sense. But you have to remember that the Kohen Gadol wasn't that the girls here are not the only ones going out and making a party. The Kohen Gadol, when he would come out b'simcha, the Gemara in the seventh part tells us there in Yuma, the Kohen Gadol would be Isa and Mishta also if he came out b'shalom. He also made a party over there. We have the story about the Kohen Gadol coming out, making a simcha. Exactly what it means he made a party was Yom Kippur. Obviously, presumably means that they were having various singing and dancing. Remember, they had signs that they knew that their tshuva was accepted on Yom Kippur. You know, the chut, um, the red string that would turn into a white string. So they had various signs before the destruction of the rings that stopped working. But in theory, we can understand why Yom Kippur became a very happy day. And it wasn't a day that was spent all day in the shul. It was essentially a day that was spent all day in Taanit and various inuyim, yes. But once the Kohen Gadol had received the kapar of the Jewish people, you can imagine it was an incredibly happy day. And as an incredibly happy day, it would make sense that the girls and the boys would be going out to make shidduchim was an unbelievable reaffirmation of the fact that we have Yitzum Hashem as Mechaper, as the people saw Bechush, and so therefore, when somebody is at his spiritual best, in the sense that they have now been forgiven of all their avodas, it makes sense that they would want to carry on and try to get married because somebody would be seeing the best in them. They would be exuding the best because they'll be on a spiritual high from the fact that they had just finished the tshuva and kapar had been received. That said, so I quoted yesterday various psukim that is brought down there in the Marshal. Marshal said, Bachum v'gam besulais, doesn't say Bachum in besulais, etc. Various psukim. So I saw that the Sefer Hasidim, actually in Siman Kuf Samach Sefer Hasidim brings down the same idea. So also with the darshan of the psukim, so it wasn't. I had always thought, I didn't mention yesterday, but there's a pasuk later on in Parshas Hazinu. And I had always remembered that Nassim Laguerre, the commentary of Rabbi Adler, the chief rabbi of England, who talked about the said Gam Bachur Gam Besul, he brought down all these psukim that proved that it wasn't the boys and girls together. But the Marshal is earlier than the Nassim Laguerre. Nassim Laguerre doesn't quote the Marshal. He's in the 1800s, but the Marshal is in the 1500s, and he already wrote that. But Sefer Hasidim is the 1200s, 1100s exactly, and that's even earlier, bringing down the same exact psukim. So the same exact, nobody's quoting anybody else, but the same exact drasha appears in all of these generations. Yeah, that was one point I wanted to mention. Second is the idea that on Yom Tovim could be a time of, you know, potential. I don't know why the word is occurring from tomfoolery, but what I mean is essentially a bawdy time, a time of boisterousness and not appropriate. We understand that in regular you have to like Pesach, like Shavuos, Sukkot, etc. Those are days which are fun. They're eating Chatzil Hashem, but also Chatzil Lachem. Ram Hilchos Yantiv told us that we have to set a policeman by the rivers so people will go hanging out, and therefore to avoid these kinds of problems. That's where there are more rights to the Marshal. And in the beginning, Shuvas there, and the Shal Shuvas with the Ramah, from Vav Zayin Chestas over there, the various Shuvas between the Ramah and the Marshal. And he says, I don't, when the Marshal is attacking for studying the philosophy, he responds, but I didn't do this on the regular days. When did I do this? I did this on the times of when people go into the rivers and hanging out. But I didn't. I was learning. Yeah. But on Yom Kippur to have a situation where they're going to be running around and having such a bloody time, that seems very shocking. So on that, I just wanted to note that it's not so shocking. Taisus and Megillah tells us on Lamed Aleph, the Machlekes de Rashi and Taisus, but according to Taisus there in Megillah, why do we read Parsha of Arayos on Yom Kippur by Mincha? Simple answer, well, if you have to have a laning by Mincha, and the morning laning was in the beginning, so the end of laning is the same parsha. You don't have to really turn the pages. Maybe. But Rashi says don't give that as a reason. Rashi gives a reason as somebody who has sinned during the year, says the parsha of Arayos, then I'd be ma'ar tshuva from him. But that's not what Taisa says. Taisa says that the reason that we are laning the parsha of Arayos and Yom Kippur by Mincha is because of the fact that a person is now going to be in shul, and the women are there. Women are there, and they're mikutrates. They're all dressed up. It's Yom Kippur. Obviously, you have to get dressed up. So there's going to be potentially a lot of inappropriate thoughts happening in Yom Kippur. So therefore, we remind people by reading the parsha of Arayos, slow down. Don't get too excited. It's Yom Kippur after all, which is a mind-boggling thing. Number one, that why the mikutrates is Yom Kippur. Put that on the side. And number two, that we have to be worried about this kind of a matzah, that maybe there's a thing. Now, it has to be that is, definitely maybe a shita of Taisus, a Taisus Yitasik, because Kedushin Pei Aleph. Over there, we talk about sick for the Shasa, regular, the worst time, the dangers of the year is by the Yom Tovim. And over there, Taisus points out that we have the Bahab fast was instituted because of the fact that there may have been some people playing around over Yantiv. But there is literally, as the Rashal already pointed out, no ability to learn from Taisus that potentially there's a heter for mixed dancing, because we already had a number of places that the Gemara, for example, we had in Brachas. The Gemara in Brachas Chavdal told us about the Kro B'isha Erva, the Sheikh B'isha Erva, all these things, the Erva, Seir B'isha Erva. And we're going to have a situation where you can actually hold have dancing, hold the other person's hand. Like, I mean, where would such an idea come from? The Gemara told us in Bracha Samach Daled that I'm halach achar isha, even ishtay is not allowed. So, but you can dance with them. It's lo yaladas. The Gemara tells in every Yerches that if a person is going to be miratzim mais miyadoy liyada, you're just giving change in the store, right? You see this in Meir Sharma. I remember always thinking about this Gemara in Meir Sharma, they give you change. They always, when the woman cash register in Meir Sharma, they always put the change in the tail. That's that Gemara, miratzim mais. From a isha leishta, from a man to woman, that you're going to pay for in a Gehenna. That's what the Gemara says. Now, there is another Gemara. The Gemara tells us on your Testament based in Yuma. The Gemara tells us that a minig Yerushalayim by the Kohen Gadol to stay up the whole night, so he shouldn't have a chash of carry. They would force him to stay awake. He had his own Shavuos nights. He had to stay up. And in order for him to stay up, they would read him Daniel, they would read him this various things. If he could read himself, he could drush, whatever he wanted, however to entertain him, to keep him up all night. Yeah, so Miyakir Yerushalayim, the Gemara says, will also stay up the whole night to keep him awake. So everybody will be making Yerushalayim a big noise, so the Kohen Gadol should be awake. So as a Zeichel Mikdash, they did this outside of Yerushalayim as well, and it ended up in parties. That's what the Gemara says. Abba Shaul says it ended up in parties. It ended up people having a boisterous old time and causing serious issues of arayos. And Mashiach, Eliyahu Navi tells of Salah Chasido, who's at Gili Eliyahu, he says, Kama besulta nivalo b'nerda. That's the Zeichel Mikdash. They ended up staying up all night. They ended up becoming a party. So it was not a practice that was continued, although some 10, 20 years ago, I remember reading a story that in Tel Aviv or something, they wanted to institute this. It's like, this is the thing, we're going to reinstitute. Yeah. The Mishnah tells us in Suga that there was a Tikkun Gadol there in the fifth parak. Tikkun Gadol was making an Ezras Nashim in the Beis HaMikdash, separating out the men and the women. Again, I'm not getting into the idea of Mechita or this and that, but to learn from this Mishnah here that you could do mixed dancing is Bechlal not, there's literally no basis. The one place you find the mixed dancing is the Gemara in Ksubis. The Gemara Ksubis Yudzayin says that, I think it was Rav Achel maybe, who would dance with the collars on his shoulders. Is that mixed dancing, or is that carrying the woman on the shoulders? I don't think it's mixed dancing, but okay, maybe over there that there is such a thing. And they asked him, Rebbe, you do this? Can we do this? He says, If it's damin aleh kikishu, if you see the woman like a beam, meaning just carrying a piece of wood, then it's mutter. Meaning that's how I see her. That's the only time that it's mutter. It was not mutter otherwise. Like the Gemara says, um, Gemara says in Brachas on Chaf that about going to the mikvah, the woman's mikvah, to help the Rav Gidel, to help help them be terrible appropriately, so he could be telling them halachas. And they asked him, how could he do that? And he said, because he sees a flock of geese. He doesn't see people. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, when he came to the women's mikvah, so they should look at him, not to answer shilas, but they should look at him and see how beautiful he is, and hopefully I'd be able to imprint on their offspring really handsome children. So they don't ask him what about Yitzhar. They're not Rabbi Yochanan. They're not being worried about Yitzhar. It's funny because Rav Gidel Nagamar never thought about this. Rav Gidel Nagamar was a yaker. He was not able to have children. Maybe that could have been an answer there. That he said, I see a flock of geese. He could have said I was the yaker from the shiurim of Rav Huna. That's the Gemara there in Yevamis and Tamach Dalet. I'm not 100% sure. In any event, maybe we can answer that. That's interesting. I never thought of that. Yeah. So the Gemara doesn't ask Rabbi Yochanan why about Ayin Hara. I'm sorry, asking about Ayin Hara. It doesn't ask him about Yetzer Hara, and he answers that he has reasons that he's not worried about Ayin Hara. But I don't see any way to make an argument from here that there was a toleration or anything. This was a spiritual day. People were on a high because of the fact that they had just received an unbelievable kapara. They saw the Chut HaShani, turned white. So they were in a good mood. They were in a wonderful mood. And as a result of being in a wonderful mood and being on a spiritual high, it was the best time to show themselves and to get a shidduch. That's how I see this Gemara. We'll just conclude that the another Sefer Hasidim there, Shin Sali Gimel, is brought down halacha by the Bach and others, is that when there is mixed eating at a Shav Brachas, they won't even say Shas Simcha B'Mayim. I'm not saying that's the halacha, that's how we do it. I'm just saying that's the level of not intermixing. So to learn from this Gemara otherwise is not appropriate. All right. So now we're at the two dots of the Gemara. The Gemara told us as follows. It says the Gemara B'Shloisha Perakim. So the Mishnah had said to us back on the page before, the Mishnah had said to us, B'Shloisha Perakim Bashana. Right, there were 3 times during the year where the Kahanim are duchening in every tefillah. 4 times a day. Shakas Muslim Mincha Ne'ilah. So the Gemara is now saying as follows. The Gemara Ta'aniyos Uma'amados Mi Ika Mustav. The Gemara asks, you're saying that they do it from 4 times a year. The 4 times a year is including Shachas, Musaf, Mincha Ne'ilah. But by Tania, is there a musaf? There's no musaf on those days. So why you're saying that it's all those 4? There's no musaf on those days. And so the more there's a ksur meksa, which is a very it's not a very uncommon technique, but it is an unbelievable technique, which basically says, look, there's something missing in the Mishnah. We're going to add it as the Amayroim to explain to you how it is. What is it? There are 3 times a year where the Kahanim are going to be duchening in every single tefillah. V'yeshmin abra pamayim, and that could be up to 4 times a day. What are those 4 times a day? Shachar, Musaf, Mincha, Une'ilah Sha'arim. Right? That's those 4 prayers. Ve'elohen Shlosha Prakim. What are the 3 prakim that are going to have these kinds of days where the Kahanim are going to be duchening in every tefillah, whatever tefillahs there are that day, whether it's maximum 4, but what are those tefillahs? And those are Taniyos, Mamadas, Yemek. The 3 different days are Taniyos. The Kahanim are going to be duchening during every tefillah then. Ma'amadas and Yom HaKippurim. Those are the 3 times that the Kahanim are going to be duchening during each and every prayer. This approach that says that the Kahanim are going to be duchening during every single tefillah, that's the approach of Rabbi Meir. Shachar Musaf Yesh Ben Nesias Kapayim Mincha Ne'ilah Ein Behen Nesias Kapayim. But the Chacham disagree. And the Chacham say, meaning not in our Mishnah. This is not in our Mishnah. The Gemara is adding in that we have now other opinions. What are these other opinions? Number 1 is the opinion of the Chacham. The Chacham hold that when do you do the duchening? You do the duchening by Shachris and by the Musaf prayers, which would be similar to what we had to do today. However, by Mincha Ne'ilah Ein Behen Nesias Kapayim, Man Chacham is the Zatim Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanya Shachris Musaf Mincha Ne'ilah Kulon Yesh Ben Nesias Kapayim Divrei Meir. So again, the same machlekes here between Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rav Meir, you do duchening every single tefillah that could be in a day on these 3 days. Right, that would be Shachas, Mincha, Musaf, and Elul, whatever is applicable on the Taanit, Mamadas, and Yom Kippur. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, no, only by Shachas and Musaf you do duchen. You don't do duchening by Mincha and Elul. Rabbi Yisrael and Elul yesh by Nesias Kapayim. Mincha ain't by Nesias Kapayim. Rabbi Yisrael disagrees. He says no, you don't. It's true that you duchen by Shachas and Musaf, but you don't duchen by Mincha. You do, however, duchen by Ne'ilah. So you have three different opinions. Rabbi Meir says you duchen by each tefillah. Rabbi Yehuda says you duchen only by Shachas and Musaf. And Rabbi Yisrael says Shachas and Musaf and Ne'ilah. Those are the three opinions. It says my conflict. What are they arguing about? Rabbi Meir Savar. Kol Yom Time of my. Rabbi Meir says that every day, right? Kol Yom Time of my loy parsika yadai ben chasam mishum shechus. Says the Gemara to explain what's the machlok between Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yosi is that according to Rabbi Meir, every day the reason that the Kahanim aren't duchening in every tefillah. Or specifically by Mincha, because every day we don't have, Musaf, we don't have Ne'ilah, we just have Shachas Mincha Ma'ariv. So why? Obviously, we're not duchening by Ma'ariv. That was never a question. Why not? Because the duchening is compared to the Avodah. The Avodah is not done by night, so therefore, right, the Beis Hamikdash, the only things that you did at night were, right, we learned the Mishnah in the beginning of Brachas that told us about the fats and things like that. Those were burned at night. But other than that, the Avodah wasn't being done at night. So the same way you're not doing avodah now, you're not duchening at night. So the only question is about shachas and mincha. Maybe you would do shachas and mincha, but for the fact that by mincha people are often drunk. Rashi explains why they're drunk, because of the fact that they're eating. As Rashi says, the kol yom shchicha be'shechus shekfar saw they already had eaten. They had already eaten. Why not? Why had they already eaten? Because most likely they were duchening by mincha, which was taking place late, and they'd already eaten dinner before that time. Continues the Gemara. So Kuntra Meir really you could duchen every day by mincha, but for the fact that everyone is drunk, so therefore we say no. Ha'idno like a shechus. But these days, meaning Taniyos, Ma'amodos, and Yom Kippur, since there's not going to be shechus, right? The people are fasting, etc. It's a big day. So then, since there's no issue of shechus, then we could duchen. And Yehuda Savar shachus must the kol yom shechus. By shachus, it's not normal to have shechus on every day, so that's why you can duchen. But mincha ne'ilah, because every single day there's typically going to be shechus at that time. Remember, people didn't generally drink water; they generally drank beer and the like because the water wasn't necessarily so safe. So therefore, goes behind abundance. Therefore, the rabbis did make a gezerah to shechus, and that applies always. Even though maybe on these days it was less of a chance of shechus because it's a tainus, nevertheless, because of the general consensus that there is shechus on a regular day, so therefore we don't duchen by mincha. So therefore, we're not going to duchen even on these days where it's less of an issue either. Rabbi Yossi Savar Mincha Deisa B'Chol Yaima. Rabbi Yossi says, no, well, we have to be more particular. Mincha, the reason that we don't do Mincha is because of the shechus. Yes, I acknowledge that. So goes to Rabbanan. Benila, the less of B'Chol Yaima. Benila is not a common prayer. It's a very rare prayer, right? And so Rabbi Yossi is agreeing that we're not going to duchen by mincha, even mincha on the tainus, we're not duchening. We're only going to duchen by ne'ilah because ne'ilah is very rare. When did ne'ilah take place? Ne'ilah took place on Yom Kippur, and it would take place on the ta'aniyos of the fast days for Gesham. It didn't take place. The ne'ilah didn't take place on the fast days for the Ma'amodes, but it did take place on the fast days for Geshamim. I should just mention back at the Gemara we had on Yud Gimel on the top of the page. The Gemara told us on Yud Gimel on Aleph that Kol Shul Mishum Eivel we're going Tisha B'Av. Whatever was because of Eivel was like Tisha B'Av. And over there, Rashi explained that it's an Avelus called Taanit Sh'atzor Cham Rechita Mishum Eivel we're going Tes B'Av Shehu Mishum Avelus Churban. And the Taniyos of the Gesham are not because of the able of the Churban, they're because of the current drought that people are having. That is to say, Rashi made a distinction between the Tainus of Tishba and the other Tanesim of Geshamim, of Atziras Geshamim. The Ran here in the beginning of the fourth parak, the Ran says that all the 4 fast days, meaning Tisha B'Av, Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, Asar B'Teves, and Tzom Gedalia, are all Mishum Evel. not Taanit Esther, because that's a happy one. But these other four fasts, the ones that are mentioned in the Navi, are all Mishum Evel, and therefore they all, in theory, shouldn't have Ne'ilah, because they're not days of Tefillah, they're days of Avelos, because of what had happened to the Jewish people over the destruction of the temple, specifically the second bias. I'm speaking also for the first bias, maybe the Hufka part of it, in terms of the first and second, maybe it's a bit of a difference, but Yudai and Tam was Asar B'Tevis and Shem Gedali are all, says the Ran, because of Avel, and therefore Ne'ilah is not appropriate. Ne'ilah is the whole idea of beseeching the Rebbeinu Shalom, that at the day of Avel, so it's not the appropriate thing. The only time we have Ne'ilah is by the Yom Kippur and by the Tzaimis for that Sirius Kisham. But this is the Gemara's machlekes that we have now between Rameh and Rabbi Yosef Yehuda. Of course, we know, right, from the Gemara in Erev and Memvav, that when you have machlekes like this, who do you have to paskin like? You have to paskin like Rabbi Yosef. Let's see what the Gemara does. So says the Gemara. So now we have listed all three opinions. I'm reviewing Rav Halach Rameir. Rabbi Yechon Amar Nagu Am Rameir. Rav Amar Minna Rabbi Meir. So we have three different versions of what it means halach is like Rabbi Meir. Either halach is like Rabbi Meir, and is the people are neighing like Rabbi Meir, or as Rava says, there's a minig like Rabbi Meir. So the Gemara now wants to explain what is the world's the difference. Man damar halach Rabbi Meir. What does it mean when we say that halach is like Rabbi Meir? That shouldn't love a pirkam. That means that you could give a shir about it. If halach is like this, then you give a shir about it publicly. Man damar minig midrash marinan. Someone says that it's just a minig, then you don't give a hashir about it. But if someone asks what the halacha, you paskin like it. Uman damar noagu, and those that say that there are people who are noig like this, every like marina, you don't even paskin like that. Of it, that you don't reverse it. You don't say, oh, you did it wrong. If somebody's doing it, it's fine. That's what they did. And do you think that wins the day? No, it does not. Rav Nachman Amar Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Yosi. Says the Gemara, and Rav Nachman disagrees with everything we just saw before. Rav and Rabbi Yochanan and everybody. Rav Nachman says, halach is like Rabbi Yosi, and the Gemara says, v'halach Rabbi Yosi. Look at Rashi here. The Gemara says, Gemara kapasik. The Gemara is pasik that the halach is like Rabbi Yosi. Mahadir stama. It brings down a stama to Talmuda. This is from our stamaim kind of period, right? And the Gemara is, this is the Basroi of the Basroi. You have Rav Nachman who's after Rav and after Rabbi Yochanan, telling you that the halacha is in fact like Rabbi Yosi, and then the Stamina Talmud adds in the halacha Rabbi Yosi. That's the stempel that the halacha is in fact going to be like Rabbi Yosi and not like Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Meir. Fine. So this is the Gemara, which again fits with what we said in Erev Memvav, obviously, but it is very interesting. What would be the opinion of those that disagreed who held like Rabbi Meir and the like? Yeah, Zodig Mar. In my time of parsik kahani yadav mchlased tanisa. The Mar asks, okay, so we just finished passing like Rabbi Yosi. That means what? That according to Rabbi Yosi, you are going to be duchening when Shachas, Musaf, and Ne'ilah, but not by Mincha. Fair to the Gemara. But nowadays, look around. My time of parsik kahani yadav mchlased tanisa. Why is it that the rabbis are being paris kapov? Why are they davening? Why are they duchening on the Mincha of a Tainus? That doesn't fit with what Rabbi Yosi just said. Gave him the Gemara answers gave him some Chama. You could feel as Ne'ilah Dam. Since the mincha is being davened at sunset or near sunset, therefore it's a like a Ne'ilah, and therefore they can duchen. Wow. So we pass like Rabbi Yosi, but not exactly, right? Yes, we do duchen by Ne'ilah. It's true, and we do not normally duchen by mincha. Yet on a mincha of a fast nowadays we do duchen because we're davening late. And therefore, it is appropriate to duchen. And in fact, we do, right? That's what we say. We say berachas kohanim here outside of Eretz Yisrael. Sfarim would actually duchen. Yeah. Okay. So we have to look at Rashi here for a second before we go any further. Rashi tells us, they wait until sunset to daven. And then they are going to daven in Hocham B'Seknes Mishay. They don't daven mincha from the earliest time that you're allowed to mincha g'dayla from 12:30 and on. The way they used to do it in those days. This Rashi bothers me, and the reason it bothers me is because, as I already pointed out earlier on your test on the base, where the Gemara said over there by the story about Nakdima and Batzaharayim Shalach Lai, right? Where's my water or money? And then the Gemara said, "B'mincha shalach." They sent them another message again, saying, "Hey, we're Where's my money? Right? I said, what's the difference between Tzarayim and Mincha? Tzarayim is in the afternoon, but Mincha sounds like a later time. Mashma telling Gemara that this is a right to what Rashi says in brachas on Tesman base and then again on Tesman base. L'fnei Yeriach Dar mitzvah l'spal in the doing cham, which we apply both by Shachas and by Mincha. We said that by Shachas is to daven by Nates and by Mincha is to daven in Shkias Achama. It's before the moon is coming out, right? By the moon coming out, that's when you daven Mincha. So we said it was master from Rashi that the mitzvah, the ikar mitzvah, the mincha was samach shkes cham. And what is Rashi over here saying? He's mashma that it wasn't like Amal when they used to do 12:30. Where was Amal? Rashi Brachas mashma the ikar mitzvah is to daven in shkes chama. Yes, you could daven earlier, but the mitzvah, the ikar mitzvah, is to daven later. So maybe this is a right to the Gemara's case. I'm not sure. In any event, just to point out what Taisus over here says. So Taisus says as follows. Taisus over here is on the bottom. Well, we'll do the top Taisus first. Taisus on the top. Taisus of Mincha Ne'ilah. Taisus points out that there's a Gemara Shabbos, which is mashma that Taisus the kosher the hecha mash over here the haka mashma the Mincha shaychas shechros, but in Shabbos on Yud it's mashma that Mincha is not shaychas shechros. Taisus answers the relative value trade. What do we mean when we say that Mincha is shaykh shechros over here and over there we say it's not shaykh? It's relative to Ma'ariv, right? That's what we're talking about. So over here we say says Taisus the kamar hasan the Mincha loy shaychas shechros. That's legabe arvis. So shechor the mincha, shechros the mincha lav klub. Because by Mariv, by the evening, you're going to be super drunk. What's it called? Toast drunk, post drunk, totally drunk. Whatever the word is, a word. Then I'm punch drunk. So then you're going to be super duper drunk, and therefore, obviously, mincha is relative to that. It's not considered drunk at all. But compared to shachris, when we say over here that you are going to be drunk by mincha, because by shachris you're waking up, nobody's waking up drunk. I shouldn't say that, but in general, right? You probably have slept it off. You're probably not going to be drunk in the morning. Whereas on mincha, you'll be more drunk than you were by shachar. So Tais says it's relative. That's the answer to the steer between Gemara Shabbos and our Gemara. The last Tais on the page, the Tais in the middle is the Gemara Shana. We have to get into. We don't have time. The bottom Tais is Alma the Parsik Kahana Yadayim Mincha that we do in fact duchen by mincha even like Pasmak Rabbi Yisi says Tais Vesel Kachna Nago Am Lemon says Kach Mincha B'Yom Kippurim. But in Yom Kippur, we don't duchen by mincha. We only duchen by ne'ilah. Why is that? Because by mincha we're still davening by day, not by shkir, right? We're davening earlier because ne'ilah is taking place after mincha. So the difference in the middle of the day, we're not going to daven by mincha. Obviously, we're not afraid of any shirkos and the like, but since we normally are, and we say we're not going to duchen by mincha, that's the psak of Rabbi Yossi. Therefore, we're not duchen by mincha ever. Even Rabbi Yehuda agree with that as well. But by mincha, by other tainis where there is no ne'ilah, so yesh nesias kapayim, where we are davening mincha late, there is nesias kapayim. So you might say, well, what if I'm davening mincha gedol on a fast day? Is there going to be duchening? Yes, okay, it's a low plug. Once we're doing it, we do it even by mincha gedol. But the ikr, mincha is mincha, but b'shkias achama, that seems to be pretty clear. And over there, normally we'll be afraid of shichos, but we're not afraid of shichos on a fast day. And even though Rabbi Yossi says that really we shouldn't do it, since it's really taking the place of Ne'ilah, we don't have Ne'ilah, so we end up with a situation that we could duchen by mincha, but of course, since on Yom Kippur we do actually have Ne'ilah, so then we're going to go back to revert to the normal Rabbi Yossi, which is we're not going to have duchening by mincha. That is Taisus over here. Again, as you pointed out from the opinion of the Ran, Ne'ilah is only there because of the days of Atiras Geshamim. There was a tefillah or Yom Kippur. It was a tefillah. But the other four ta'anesim is not for tefillah, it's for Eva. So therefore, there's no Ne'ilah. So, okay, I don't have Ne'ilah. Why am I putting it to Mincha? Ne'ilah, the Mincha is a replacement for the Ne'ilah. But if I don't have it by, but the Gemara is mashma. There wouldn't be any. The Ran is mashma. There shouldn't be any on those four tanesim because the days are not for tefillah. They're there for avelas. Look at the Gemara. The Gemara is mashma not that way. Right? So this is a kasha on the Ran. The Gemara is mashma over here. In my time, parsik ani dav min chos tanisa came with the samach shkesacham parsik tefillas nila damyo. But I shouldn't have nila according to the way the Ran is doing. So I leave that as a question to stick on the Ran. All right, be it as it may, perhaps we stay like. Maybe the institution of the day is as a avelus, but fundamentally We are davening for restitution of the Beis Hamikdash, etc. So it becomes also an aspect of tefillah, at least by the time of mincha, right? And maybe not at the beginning of the day, especially on Tisha B'av, where it will be avelis only. Yeah. Zot the Gemara. So we are now going back to 4 or 5 lines up from the bottom. So the Gemara says, "The kuli alma mias shikar asur b'nesias kabayim." Everyone agrees that a kohen is asur to duchen if he's drunk, and that's the reason why they had certain takanas, maybe bar mincha, maybe not, whatever. They had disagreements, but fundamentally, everyone agrees that you cannot be duchening when you're drunk. Minani mili. How do you know? I'm Rabbi Shimon Levi. Mishmar kabar laminis b'chol parshas ken mevarich leparshas nazir. Why is the parsha of the Birchas Kohanim, right there in Parshas Nazir, right next to the Parsha of Nazir. Learn my Nazir, right? We're dashing here Smuchim. Smuchim at Torah Minayin, right? The Gemara said that maybe there's no Smuchim, there's Machlokes, Smuchim, Torah Kula. And we talked about before in Brachas a couple of times. So over here, the Gemara is assuming that there's a Smuchim between Nazir and Birchas Kohanim. Another Asabiyain, after Mavarch Asabiyain, just like another Asabiyain, so to a Kohen is Asabiyain. Maskalar Buddha Rav Zero, Ramila Ishabar Zabdi, my Nazir Asabacharts, and after Mavarch Asabacharts. And well, 1 second, a Nazir is not just also to be drunk, he's also to even have a seed, he's also to have a raisin, he's also to have a lot of things. So you're going to say Kohen who's going to be duking is also in all those things too? Obviously not. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yisrael, Marko Lashar Sudavark. We have a pasuk that tells us that the Kohen is Lashar Say, to serve Hashem and to make a blessing in His name, meaning to do avodah and to do berachas kohanim. And we're going to not compare the two. Mamishuris with the b'charetz and afkaim avarchim with the b'charetz. Just like a kohen who's doing avodah is mutter to have a seed of the grape, so to the kohen who's making a duchening is also mutter to have a seed of the grape. Now we're trying to page of Zayin now. Mamishuris balmum. So it says more. So you want to add the misharis? No problem. But the misharis also has an isser of balmum. Says the Gemara, so Imam Mishar is Balmum, just like a kohen who's doing Avodah B'Shem Mikdash is also is a Balmum, right? The whole parsha Emor, etc. Av kohen Mavarch Balmum Lish. So too, the kohen wants to do him should be possible if he's a Balmum. Says no, it's Kishla Nazir. It's compared to a Nazir, just like a Nazir is mutter by is a Balmum. So to a and kohen Mavarch is mutter is a Balmum. So like in a sense, it's a loy roizek. Whereas that's how the Shafaship hands he's mutter in Charton and his mutter is a Balmum. Because a kohen misharis is mutter in chartzen, and another is mutter as a balmum. So therefore, a kohen mavarch is mutter for chartzen and balmum. Says the Gemara, what? Well, my cause is the makshis lakula, akshis lachumra. So why are you taking this hekish lakula? Take a lachum. As Taisus points out here in the second Taisus, do it the other way. Just like a kohen misharis is aser if he's a balmum, so to a kohen mavarch aser is balmum, and just like another aser b'chartzen, so to a kohen mavarch aser has a chartzen. Why not do it that way? Says the Gemara, no. As machtanenu midrabanan ulakula. This is just an asmachta. Please stop hacking me at shining. This is only an asmachta. It's all drabanan. We knew, in fact, going in on this, that the kohen mavarch is mutter if he's a balmum, and if he had charatzanim, he obviously he cannot be drunk. Why? Because we know about the kohen says yayim shecher al teish. So we know he can't be drunk, but this idea of what we were just playing around with, that how do we know why we didn't just say Yaim Shecha Al Teish that it applies to the Kohen when he's duchening? I'm not sure, but this is aspect of it of just bringing down these psukim. Don't view it as more than just asmachtas, and therefore we're going to go l'kulam. Here we have in monumental Tosfos, and we only have a minute to discuss it, but we will quickly run through the bottom part of the first Tosfos. Tosfos what does he have a kohen who converts to Christianity, Islam, etc., and he then comes back and does tshuva? Is he going to be permitted to duchen? We know the whole big simon there in Arachaim in Kuf, Kaf, Ches deals with all the psulim of the Kahanim. Why we don't duchen now? The whole thing we've maybe talked about some of that here. I don't have to get into it now, other than the fact that Shulchan Aruch brings down both opinions. Yes, he could duchen, he can duchen. If you look in Taisus Menachos Kuftes, also in Saita on Lamites, so over there Taisus talks about the various opinions. Over there we bring down a Sheiltas. The Sheiltas, I think it's in Parashas Korach, says that a kohen who is Hemer Dasai, right, and he does tshuva, he shouldn't be allowed to duchen. He is ruined. And the Rebbeinu Gershom says no. He has to be allowed to be duchening. Otherwise, people are not going to want to do tshuva. They're not going to want to become Baal tshuva, which reminds us of the Gemara in Bava Kama Tzadi Dal, the Gemara over there tells us about the Taanit Hashavim. I think I talked about it here during Taanit, which is we canceled out a mitzvah's essay, right? We canceled out a Heshav Esek Gazei Lasher Gozo, Ibnei Taanit Hashavim. We want to encourage people to do tshuva. You're going to say a kohen who went, he had a down point in his life that he can't come back, then you're going to cause people not to want to ever do tshuva. So Tais over here says that a kohen who went off, then he comes back, is allowed to duchen. And interestingly, Tais points out, as which is brought down in these other Tais as well, he's allowed to essentially not to lane. Well, it literally means just to lane, but it means also to get that first aliyah as a regular kain. And the lashon of the Rabbeinu Gershon the tshuva is very poignant. Because what Allah is avla, right? That the person who's not going to be coming back and he's not going to be treated as a kain, he's going to literally have to what, sit there and not be able to get an aliyah and be treated like a regular Yisrael. Like it would be a big disaster. Yeah. All right. We have to move on. Exactly more the two dots. Elohein Mahamodes. Says the more Michael, what are we talking about when we say that these are the Mahamodes? Because it says Savas Bnei Yisrael. Elohein Mahamodes. These are the Ma'amades we've been talking about, right? The special groupings of the Kohanim within Israel that they would hang around and do various tefillas and fast and all interesting lanings and all of this in order to help be representatives of the Jewish people for the Karban Talmud. Why were they attacking Ma'amades? Because it says in Pasuk that the Jewish people were commanded to bring Karban Talmud every day. As carbon carbon shalom karv, how could the carbon be brought? And there's no kain who's going to be hanging out there. They were attacking 24 mishmars. The Navim we're going to see later on, Moshe and Shmuel and David, etc. They had 24 different mishmars of kain, and were there for 48 weeks. And instead, all the mishmars would work together on the Yom Tovim for the rest of the year. I'll call mishmar. And there was a maimed for a mishmar for each for each week. And during when they had the Mishmar, there would be a Ma'amid in Yerushalayim of the Kahanim and Levim and Yisraelim. Remember, as I said, the Yisraelim who lived in Yerushalayim or nearby would come with the Kahanim and Levim. If they lived far away, the Yisraelim would stay. Higiyaz Ma Mishmar allows when there would come time for the Mishmar to go up. Kahanim Levim and Yerushalayim. The Kahanim Levim would go to Yerushalayim, and again, the Yisraelim would live nearby as well. And that's how it worked. Says the Gemara now, a very interesting line. There was 24 mishmaros in Eretz Yisrael and 12 in Yericho. Why is Yericho not being considered Eretz Yisrael? I'm not 100% sure I understand that. Be it as it may, that would end up being, instead of 24, now you have 24 and 12. So you have 36 mishmaros anymore. What are you talking about? It's way more than 24. What do you mean? There were 12, I'm sorry, there were 24 mishmaros, 12 of them were in Yericho. What does that mean? When the time will come for that specific mishmar, half of the mishmar will go to Yerushalayim. And the other half would go from Yericho. Rashi explains they would go down to Yericho, which I guess had a lot of provisions, and it wasn't too far away from Yerushalayim. They would load up on whatever provisions they needed, and then they would come to Yerushalayim. So all the 24 mishmars that would do that. So each mishmar would be divided into two. Half would go to Yerushalayim direct, half will go to Yericho to get supplies, and then converge in Yerushalayim. I have to stop over here.